Good afternoon, everybody. I almost said good evening, but I still think we got a couple more hours before evening. So we went ahead and opened up the webinar. We still got a couple more minutes till we get started, but we wanted to make sure all the participants were able to get in with no problem. So if you just want to kind of hang out for a few more minutes. If you're in the tri-state area today, we had a little bit of rain, so that means it's super humid right now. We had last year, I believe, Melissa, when we were doing this, we had one of our families from South Carolina, and they were sitting out next to their lake in South Carolina with, I think it was like 85-degree weather with no humidity.
Yes, we were very jealous. I recognize some last names. Good to see everybody.
We had the session, and I'll talk a little bit about this. We had a session this afternoon, right at noon, with many of your students, if they attended. They thought it went very well. Great questions. Students stayed afterwards to ask additional questions, so that was great. That level of engagement is always what we're looking for. So we're getting close to 6, but we'll wait another minute or so. Like I said, we'll be getting started again. Participants, we want to make sure everybody has the opportunity to jump in. And I share that same sentiment with Melissa. I'm seeing lots of Summer Spark and Summer Academy parents in the room. It's good to see you again. So we're at 6. So we'll maybe just go over a few announcements to get us started, and then we'll go ahead and get started at 6:01 as people to continue to trickle in. We know it's either after work or after dinner, so please feel free to come and go as you please. So just a couple announcements again. If you wouldn't mind, even though we have it already set to mute, if you could just maybe go ahead and mute yourself just in case. And we always know sometimes background noises can be distracting to everybody. So it's always a good thing to mute. And what we are going to do is, if you want to open up along the bottom, you should have an icon that says Q&A. We're going to go ahead and field questions throughout this evening's presentation as well. This evening's presentation will last about 45 minutes, 40 to 45 minutes. And then we'll go ahead, Melissa and I will stick around and answer any questions. We'll allow you to kind of maybe unmute yourself if you just want to continue to use the Q&A. We'll stay around and answer any questions that you may have that maybe wasn't covered in the presentation or you'd like more information. So Melissa, I see 6:01, so why don't we go ahead and get started?
Ryan, we do have someone saying they're not able to hear the audio. I wonder if it's just one person, or are we having some difficulties with others?
Sure, if everybody could go in, maybe just a couple people go into the Q&A. Are you able to hear us okay?
Okay.
Yes, we're good. Just maybe one person having a little bit of issues with the computer.
Okay.
Perfect. And somebody asked, how do you mute or unmute? If there's not a mute button on the bottom, you should be able to see it right next to your Q&A. It means it's already been disabled, so you're already muted, so you should be good there. It just depends on your Zoom settings that you have set up. And again, we're in a webinar, so that tends to mute everybody automatically, but with technology, you just never know. So, all righty. So we are right at 6:01. So why don't we go ahead and get started? I'll introduce myself first. My name is Ryan Paget. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Enrollment and Student Success. My role basically over the university, I see a number of our student success initiatives and programs, and that included our Summer Bridge program, such as Summer Spark and the Summer Academy. So it's good to see everybody again today. And I'll turn it over to Melissa, who has worked with you and your students prior, and then the handover to their first year. So Melissa, if you want to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Ryan. Hi, my name is Melissa Gorband, and I'm the Director of Undergraduate Admissions. So our team hopefully helped your family through the onboarding process and choosing NKU. And I know we have parents from freshman year all the way to senior that have joined us. So we're so grateful that you're part of the Norse Nation community. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Melissa. And again, Melissa is going to be kind of behind the scenes, helping answer questions throughout and any other logistical stuff that we need. And then she'll be joining us, unmuting herself at 6:45 to answer any questions as well. So, one of the things I want to make sure we highlight, I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen here to get the presentation up. And Melissa, if you wouldn't mind unmuting just to make sure that you can see this presentation.
I can.
Perfect.
There we go. Good to go.
All righty. So what we do is within our parent programs at NKU, we have over the last 3 years started to really develop a stronger partnership with our parents and our family members. And that program that we started is called Stronger Together. And the reason we believe Stronger Together is so important is that we know this is a partnership with you as we continue to support your student, not only with the transition into the first year and beyond, but even as alumni. We know that this is a continued partnership. We always have the joke that as soon as parents kind of move their student along into college, that those bedrooms become quilting rooms or man caves. But what we really have started to see, especially over the last 3, 4, 5 years, is how heavily involved the students expect the parents and family members to be. And I'm going to illustrate that with some actual data that came out over the last few years from our students. So we had asked our students as they were kind of starting out those first couple weeks of the semester in that fall, who do you primarily expect will influence you more academically? So we asked them this question before they started college, and then we asked them right after that first semester. And before they started college, about 30% of the students said that they were anticipating that their faculty or instructors were going to be who influenced them more academically. And then again, about 30% for parents and family members. But then when we asked this exact same question, instead of who do you primarily expect, it was who did influence you more academically. You can see that students responded it was actually parents and family members, nearly 1 out of 2 students. And then another question that we had asked is if you had an academic related issue or concern, who do you primarily expect to seek counsel from? Before college, it was primarily faculty and instructors. So those that were inside the classroom, hey, if I've got a question about organic chemistry, I'm going to go to my organic chemistry faculty member. And then I think you can see as I flip here, you know where this answer may be going. It was after the first semester, they had said that they had primarily relied on their parents and family members, which can be a little daunting as a parent or a family member, especially if they're coming to you asking for organic chemistry help. So when we started to realize this, we moved very quickly to say, okay, let's put programs and supports in place to make sure we're supporting our parents and family members. And so that's why you get invited to the listservs to hear about timely dates and information. And we really wanted to introduce this session in particular because week 4 really could be a turning point for our students. A lot of times we say it's during midterms when you get your midterm grades, and that's kind of a check-in to see how you're doing. Our argument is sometimes midterms are really late. And so students can very easily during their 3rd, 4th, or 5th week start to realize, wait a second, something's not right, or I'm starting to hit an obstacle or a wall. And so we want to say to those students, now's the time to meet that obstacle and remove it. And so we feel, again, Stronger Together, working with parents and family members, working with you to also arm you with that information so that if a student does come to you, you have some ideas of maybe resources or support you can provide to them. So to start then, I'm going to provide a little bit of a context. And I start this out kind of jokingly, but you'd be surprised at how often this is something that is an important conversation with your student as we are now in week 4 of the semester. And we use this meme with our students to really kind of illustrate foundationally, we can't talk about student success if you're not even inside the classroom. So a lot of your faculty require attendance inside the classroom for that first year. Some do not. But what sometimes happens for those classes that do require attendance is they'll see, hey, if I miss 1 or 2 classes, it doesn't impact my grade. So maybe I'm just going to sleep in today, or I've got something else going on and I'm going to miss. But we cannot emphasize enough just how important being in class, how important that is for their success. And I even told the students this afternoon during that noon session that we had with them, that where you sit in the classroom is also important. There's a research paper that's done, and it's been shown over and over and over again. It's been vetted enough that as a faculty member, if I walk into a classroom and I know nothing about your student, I don't know their high school grades, their GPA, I know nothing about them. If I walk in and stand in the front of the class, I can fairly accurately tell you what their grade is going to be in that class. And the principle behind that's called the inverted T. And so if you were standing in front of the classroom and looking out at your class, if you were to think of an upside down T or an inverted T, the students that are sitting up front are usually your A students, maybe 2nd and 3rd rows are on the sides of your B students. And as you work your way back to the back of the classroom, you have C, Ds, and Fs. And I tell our students, I gave the example today, It's a lot easier to be in the back row on your phone with your earbuds in than it is up front. Because usually when you're up front, you're making eye contact with your faculty member because your faculty member is making eye contact with you a lot easier because you tend to be engaged, and that's where a lot of the questions come from. So again, it sounds so simple, but before we can even move into student success in the first 4 weeks, we got to make sure our students are attending class. So what I want to really make sure we're all kind of on the same page about in terms of how we support your students. One of the things I think oftentimes when you hear about support or you think about the resources that are on campus for a student, we tend to think about the academic side of the house, tutoring, writing center, office hours. But at NKU, we really take a coordinated approach at supporting students, specifically, and for arguments for this presentation, since you all are first year, or have students, I should say, that are first year students, we look at it kind of in 6 areas. Yes, there's the academic side of the house, academic preparedness and academic advising, kind of the things that also take place within the classroom. But we also know for your student to be successful, that if they have an academic path, they also need to have a financial path, okay? Similarly, we also know that they need a career path aligned with their academic plan, as well as a health and wellness. Okay, so if your student's doing great in the classroom, but maybe struggling with some test anxiety or sense of belonging, don't feel like they're making friends on campus, and that's impacting their health and wellness, that's an area of concern that we want to make sure we address and provide support for. Similarly, we have student engagement on here as well, because we know, especially as coming out of, well, I shouldn't say coming out, obviously we're still in the middle of the pandemic, but what we heard from students as they made the transition from virtual to in person was that need for that socialization, that interactions both inside and outside the classroom with faculty and staff. But what we're hearing more and more about, and we're going to talk about, is their peers and how much they really rely on their peers on campus. So I told the students that, again, today, if you can do these 6 areas well, or you're doing well in these 6 areas, you'll likely be successful during your first year. So we're going to go through the presentation today, and I'm actually going to show you real data from your students. So your students were invited to participate in a survey during the first couple of weeks of school, and we had such a good turnout for that we had a representative sample of our first year population statistically. And so what I'm going to show you is real data. This isn't older data. This is data from our incoming students this year. And when we saw this data, we said, okay, here are some things that we want to make sure we address. And that's why a lot of the communication your students have been seeing over the last week or so, and will continue to see, is because we know that they have some concerns or are already hitting some walls. And so we want to make sure as an institution and working with you, we remove those obstacles and are working very closely with our students to help them. So what you need to know now, again, these are actual data that came from your students. So that's why we feel heading into week 4, this is important. So nearly 60% of NKU first year respondents expressed that staying positive when they do poorly on an assignment or test might be challenging for them, okay? Many of your students will already have received assignments or tests or quizzes during the first couple of weeks of school, or may this coming week or the following week, before midterms even take place. And those grades are usually then posted in Canvas. And so when we talk to students about this, and the importance of this is, you could have had a student coming in 4.0 in high school, never got a B in their entire life, but they come in and all of a sudden they got that B or C, and that shock hits them for that first quiz. Or you had a student that came in, maybe that 3.0, 2.8 student has, had some ups and downs academically, but is really confident about this quiz. And then all of a sudden they take the quiz and boom, they got a 50. And just how much of a hit that is to them, saying, oh my gosh, I thought I was prepared for college, but all of a sudden I've taken this test and it's completely different. Or I was used to high school when a lot of those tests were memorizations, kind of knowing definitions. And all of a sudden this transition into colleges, it's not only memorization and knowing the definitions, we're now applying those definitions in a real world setting. And sometimes that can be really difficult for students. And so what we want to make sure of then is we don't want them to wait or to think, because we hear this all the time from our students. Okay, I got a D on my first quiz, I'm going to make it up in the midterm. And they change no behaviors or no patterns to rectify why they got that D on the first test or quiz. And so what we want to make sure of then during week 4 is we want to let you know of a couple things. Midterm grades, when they come out, again, your students will start midterms in week 8, so the exact midpoint of the semester. Those grades start getting posted on October 11th. But more importantly, grades have already started to be posted in Canvas. We want our students making sure they check Canvas and understand where they're coming from in terms of, do they need to make up a test, or even what I'm going to argue, and you're going to see on the next couple of slides, I got an A on this quiz. What are you doing to make sure you're continuing to maintain getting that A? And so we strongly encourage students then to go to tutoring in the Writing Center. And so what I want to do now is make sure to destigmatize tutoring. Because often when we hear about tutoring, it's, oh, only students who are struggling need to go to tutoring, or students who need help, or it's almost like you're going to the principal's office. You have to just kind of shuffle into tutoring because you've done something wrong. And I'm going to show you how that is not the case in college, especially at NKU. So I'm going to talk about who gets tutored. So now this is pre-pandemic data. It's a little bit different. So this is now in-person tutoring. And I wanted to showcase this data because we're now back into, well, hybrid. We do offer in-person tutoring, but we also offer tutoring in Zoom or over the phone. But pre-pandemic, over 2,200 students visited a tutor. That's about 1 out of every 7 NKU students went to a tutor. Now that's impressive in itself, but it's the next number that tells you why it's working. If we had 2,200 students that were visiting or using a tutor, we had over 15,000 visits. And what that breaks down to is then every student that was coming into tutor on average was coming 7 times, okay? Now I gave the example, if you're going to a restaurant 7 times, you're not saying, boy, the last 7 times I came to this restaurant, it's been awful. You're not going to that restaurant after the first or second time. So if a student's repeating, coming back to tutoring, something's working, okay? And so when we talk about tutoring, students say, well, is my class offered? Yes, we have over 400 courses that are offered by tutoring. And what Learning Plus will do is if you are in a new class or a class that doesn't have a tutor, they will find you one, okay? And so that's why we have over 130 students utilized. So going back then to the average of 7 visits per student, okay? What's the students who are visiting Learning Plus are not necessarily the students that are struggling. Over half of the students who attended Learning Plus had a GPA above a 3.0, and a quarter of the students who visited and went and saw tutoring had above a 3.5. So there are 2, well, maybe more, but what we see are basically 2 populations of students that are attending tutoring. You've got the student who went to tutoring and got the help they needed and was like, oh my gosh, I'm seeing my grade start to escalate, start to get higher. I'm going to continue to come back because that's a good behavior, okay? Or you're seeing the student who was already high performing and saw the value of continuing to maintain that high GPA, and they're continuing to go and visit tutoring. And then what we see is those students become our tutors when they're juniors and seniors, okay? And so again, encourage your students. They think it's like a slap in the wrist or something, like, hey, I got to go to the principal because I did bad. That's not the case at all. It's a way to, yes, turn around your grade, but what we're seeing is when students start going, they really start to see, oh, there's a benefit here. I give the example all the time. We had a student a couple of years ago. He's our student veteran in our veteran resources station. And what he was telling our students all the time was he would sit in there. He was one of our student workers. And he would hear students saying, oh man, I'm struggling on this paper. And he was like, every single term paper or large paper I had, I took it to our writing center. Because every single time I did it, I saw a letter grade jump in my paper because I was taking a B paper and making it into an A- or an A because I was sitting down with someone and noticing my mistakes. But it was making me a better writer. And it's like he said, for an investment of maybe 30 to 45 minutes each session, I saw my GPA go from a 3.0 to a 3.4. That was a strong investment in my time. And so again, if you start to see your students saying they're struggling or just kind of asking, hey, how are things going? If there is that little inclination of hesitation, really help them kind of destimulate, basically say, like, tutoring is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. And more students do it than don't. So really encourage them to do it. All right, another data point that's important. Over 90% of our incoming students expect to have difficulty managing their time during their first year of college. It's a very large number. Now, we know historically, students have had difficulty managing time. It's something that is very real to them. I give the example all the time. When they come from high school, they went from a very rigid schedule, 8 to 3. They had their classes. They knew every 45 minutes where they needed to be. They knew exactly what time their lunch was. Let's say they went from soccer practice from 3 to 4:30, drove home, had dinner with the family from 5:30 to 6, studied from 6 to 7:30, and then they were on TikTok from 7:30 to noon or midnight. that is what it is, but they had their regimen. They knew exactly where they needed to be. All of a sudden they come to college and I've got class at 9 on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I have class as well at 1, and then maybe a class on Monday, and only Monday at 6 o'clock at night. I have my biology lab at 10 o'clock on Tuesday, and I have history at Tuesday at 1 o'clock on Tuesdays and Thursdays. All of a sudden they've got all this free time, and we see students struggle with that free time. Now we know 55% of our incoming students work, and they work either part-time or full-time. And so they already are balancing some of these things. But we already jump in and start talking to students about, okay, how are you going to manage this time? What are you going to do? And so this is where we really rely heavily, not only on having an honest conversation, but we really want to turn it over to you to make sure you're engaging with them in this conversation as well, because it needs to be a very honest conversation. You know what your academic schedule looks like. You know what your courses are going to look like, but what are you doing in between, before, and after classes to make sure you're staying on top of things, but that you're not overwhelmed, okay? And if they are working, we're starting to have some very honest conversations with our students. We just had one last week, actually. I think it was on Thursday or Friday. We had a student that came in and we sat down and talked with them. They didn't want to give up their part-time job. I believe it was at Panera. Don't quote me on that. And she was, getting $10 an hour. And so we kind of turned it on them and said, well, would you be interested in working somewhere else for $10? And the student said, well, what do you mean? And it goes back to this tuition reimbursements and incentives. So the economy right now, so many jobs are opening that, especially for student workers, that a number of corporations, especially restaurants, are offering tuition incentive programs. So you could work at this restaurant over here for $10 and get obviously your wages. Or would you consider maybe going to Chipotle, who's also paying $10, but is offering a $1,000 tuition reimbursement that goes directly towards your tuition just simply for working there? McDonald's is offering the same thing. If you work over 60 hours at McDonald's, they'll start giving you money towards, it's like a tiered program. Well, they'll start paying off some of your tuition on top of your wages. And so these are some of the things as well, from an affordability standpoint and a financial support, that we can start helping work our students through. And so start to have some of those conversations with your students as well, as it feeds into the time management. Now, I'll give another real life example. I taught one of our first year courses about 5 or 6 years ago. And I had a student, amazing student. I share this all the time, was one of the best writers I've ever seen for a first year student coming in. It was fun reading her writing. It was just, her writing was so beautiful. And she sat in the very front, so very active student, A student, okay? Simply an A student. And so she started I saw about 5th, 6th, 7th week, I started to see her engagement start to fall off, and I start to see her grades start slipping. So I pulled her after class. I said, hey, what's going on? I'm starting to see some issues with your engagement and some other things. She says, I'm struggling with time management. I said, walk me through what your day looks like. Well, she lived on campus, but she was a manager at a Skyline, and she didn't want to lose that position because it was paying well, and she had worked all through high school to get to that manager's position. So she was living and going to school at NKU in Highland Heights, but her job was up in Mason, Ohio. So every single day she was driving up, leaving campus, driving all the way up to Mason, if you can imagine 75 and 71 traffic right now, working her shift and coming back. And there were some days where she would actually leave to go up to work the lunch shift, come back, go up to work the dinner shift, and come back. She says, I'm struggling with time management, I'm struggling with money. I said, well, all your money's going towards your gas. She didn't put one and two together to say, wait a second, I'm wasting so much time traveling, because she was so worried about keeping that job. That job was having a ripple effect on her, everything kind of academically and kind of within her life and all the balance. So we were able to work with her. She actually ended up transitioning over to a position in Applebee's right up there in Highland Heights. So she didn't have all that commute, and she was able to kind of bounce back from that. But again, these are honest conversations. We can't make the assumption that our students know how to manage time, because it might have been easy in high school because of how rigid it was. Now that they've got all this free time, we see students struggle all the time, because it's easy to say, hey, I've got a quiz coming up next week. I'll study for it because I've got plenty of time. And then all of a sudden, 11:59 on Thursday comes up, and it's like, I haven't even cracked my book for that quiz yet. So it's helping them understand that balance. So what we know then too, talking about balance, is you've heard this over and over as you were going through, I'm sure, orientation. Your students are hearing about it all the time on campus about getting engaged. And one of the things that we want to make sure, kind of to debunk a myth around engagement, is a lot of students think it takes a lot of time, it costs money, And really, when they hear about getting engaged on campus, they think instinctively, I think because of the movies and television, they think of fraternities and sororities. But one of the things I want to debunk here is the amount of programs that we have on campus for your student to get involved in is not just what you think of when you think of Animal House. It really is a number of other programs that are designed specifically for your student in mind, okay? And the other reason we really want to encourage engagement, and we're going to get to it, is it ties to time management. But there's a peer aspect. When you're engaged in some type of either academic or co-curricular program or service or organization, you're with other students who also share that similar interest, and that's how they meet other students. Because you're going to hear as we go through this presentation, peers are so important to your students right now. If they have an issue, it used to be they'd go to a faculty member, or they'd go to a staff member, they'd maybe go to a parent or family member, obviously, while we're having these conversations. But we're finding more and more they're going to other peers to ask them, hey, I got a question about this, or I'm struggling with this. What are your thoughts? Because it can be intimidating as a first-year student to go to a faculty member or to come up to a staff member. It's a lot easier to turn to a friend or someone in class and ask them. And so we know if they get involved, we see not only that socialization continue to grow, we tend to see higher GPAs, higher retention rates, and higher graduation rates for those students because they create that sense of community that they've been desperately missing for those last 2 years. And so they're looking for that community and that sense of belonging. So getting involved can definitely shape that for them. And so I'm not going to go through each one of these, but I want to highlight some of the areas to kind of, like I said, debunk some of these myths. There's the academic side of the house. So if your student's really interested in computer science, there's honors programs tied to that. You've got cybersecurity clubs that they can get involved in. Every college has different organizations that are plugged in. Getting involved academically also maybe means doing research with a faculty member. We have so many research opportunities with our faculty that they have students come into the labs to help out. And that's an amazing opportunity for them. We have service. So NKU is known for their service, and we really pride ourselves as being an institution of place, being in the region and feeding the economy of our region. 82% of our graduates, when they graduate, work within the greater Cincinnati and tri-state area. We are literally feeding the economic pipeline. And so service is so important because corporations notice that. Corporations say, wait a sec, a lot of our graduates are NKU graduates. I see these community service. Let's get plugged in as well on that. And so this is a critical thing for us and something we pride ourselves in. Obviously, again, I talked about fraternity and sorority, and obviously a lot of students engage in that and thrive in that. The next two are really critical as well. We really encourage our students to be leaders, not only inside and outside the classroom, but within the community as well. So there's a lot of leadership opportunities, especially for freshmen. A lot of times students think I have to be a junior or senior to be a leader. That's not the case at all. You can be a freshman, and we have leadership committees that are developed for freshmen, as well as getting involved in student governance. So we have our SGA. So our SGA has positions specifically for first-year students because we want the voice of the first-year students to be there. And then, of course, as they continue on through their first year, they can become residential assistants. And then you've obviously got some media. So media and communications is a big thing right now, and students are getting more and more involved with that. We have special interests. So we have LGBTQ, international, Best Buddies, which again is tied to our service. We have our activities board. So there's a whole bunch of different things. If they're interested in Dungeons and Dragons, we've got the Dungeons and Dragons Club. If they're interested in gaming, we've got our gaming club, which was actually competed last year. They were nationally ranked, and we're in the Final Four nationally. So NKU has a strong gaming culture as well. We also have faith-based. We are proud of our 12 faith-based organizations. So there's obviously a lot of community aspect to that in the churches and organizations that they have within the community, but then they're also are tied very closely to NKU, as many of those organizations have faith-based organizations on campus. And then obviously our sports clubs. So we have our 20 teams, but in addition, we have campus rec and intramurals. So the reason we also really want to highlight this, obviously making the connection, the sense of belonging is critical, but the other illustrative point that we like to make with our students is how it relates to career readiness. Because one of the things that we really, again, we talk about is if you have an academic plan and you know what courses you want to take, I need to make sure that you also have a career plan, because in 4 years, or even in 3.5 years, you're going to start putting your resume out there and competing with thousands of other college students for these jobs. And so how are you going to make yourself competitive to those hiring directors? And one of the ways to do that is through a resume and getting involved. So give the example real quick. If I was a hiring director, I have 3 college students that are going to be grads here soon, and they're competing for the same position. I've got 3 resumes in front of me. I've got one resume, and let's say all three of these students are 3.5 students, all have the same major, 3.5. Before I even look at the resume, they're equal. But the first resume I look at is a half a page because haven't gotten involved at all. I'm going to look at that and say, all this student did was focus on academics. Next resume. I get another resume. That resume is a little bit more filled. They did do student involvement, maybe got involved with a faculty member in undergraduate research their junior year and got involved with a couple clubs their senior year. I'm, as a hiring director, looking at that and saying, okay, they got involved, but I also know that they started to pad their resume and started to panic a little bit because they only got involved their junior and their senior year. So they were involved, but perhaps not as involved as I would like to see. Move it on. And then I moved to that third resume, and I can obviously, you know where this is going. Long resume, has everything that they were involved their freshman year, their sophomore year. We're doing different activities in terms of service, student organization, student government, maybe did some research with a faculty member, also worked a job. And as a hiring manager, I'm saying not only is this an academically qualified, not only did they get involved, but what that tells me is, because the number one thing employers are looking for is autonomy, is that this student knows how to manage their schedule, because not only did they get a 3.5, they did it while doing all these other things, all these level involvement. This involvement probably led to some leadership roles that they've had. And so when I then hire them, I know that this student, or this graduate now, is going to not only be academically sound and ready to go, but I know time management there. And since they've been able to balance and kind of manage that, I guarantee their self-autonomy in terms of being able to turn a project over to them, to have them do it on their own, is going to be a lot stronger. So that's why, again, it's not just sense of belonging. It's not just getting them involved socialization. It's preparing them for their next steps so that when they leave here, they're ready to basically defend themselves in front of a hiring manager saying, I'm your best candidate and here's why. All right, next data point. And we want to spend a little bit of time on this. So nearly 80% of our first year respondents stated that they experienced an increase in their mental exhaustion as a result of COVID. And then furthermore, 65% of those students expressed an increase in depression. So this is something obviously that has come through COVID. I think a lot of that has to do with being virtual, and then all of a sudden you come in and you're trying to manage kind of a hybrid approach, or if many of our students were virtual all year last year, and then all of a sudden they come back into a brand new college environment, lots of stimuli, lots of things thrown their way, lots of opportunities, but it's like, oh my gosh, I've got to not only get back to being in the classroom, but I've got to be in the classroom with people I don't even know. And so it's a little bit of a lot at once. And so we know that not only are our students going through a lot of mental exhaustion, but we know really society in general has reported this as we've seen some things. And so one of the things that we want to make sure to our students is, don't just assume that that mental fatigue or that mental exhaustion is just going to disappear or go away as time goes on. Because as you go through a semester, regardless of the pandemic or COVID, the natural inclination going through a semester is it's going to get more stressful and more harder as midterms hit, as finals hit, as all these new opportunities are coming. You're starting to balance more. It can be a toll on a student. And so if a student's talking to you, if your child or your student's talking with you, make sure that they know that counseling is free at NKU. So the president, through some equity funding, has put $250,000 into mental health issues and mental health support for our students. And so counseling is free for all students. All they need to do is make an appointment, okay? In addition, counseling is available not only in person, but through telehealth, such as Zoom or telephone. And the other thing is we offer 24-hour counseling. So even after hours, can be a little daunting because the telephone number is the NKU police number. So if a student needs support with mental exhaustion in the middle of the night, or something's come up and they want to call us and they see, wait, I'm calling the police. The reason for that is because we know we have 24-hour surveillance with our NKU police department. They answer the call and get them connected immediately to a counselor, an on-call counselor. So again, we don't want these issues to continue to percolate and get worse as they go on. We have the resources in place. We've made the investments in place to help students out. So please encourage your students to seek that help out. And if they just want to stop in and just kind of say, hey, I need to talk to somebody, Counseling Services is located in University Center 440. So I want to make sure everybody knows that. It's on the 4th floor. But again, if you just go in and just like any Google search, type in NKU and Counseling Services, you'll be able to help your student out, providing them with the resources that they need. So again, Obviously, college is stressful enough, and there's a lot of things going on in the world that is adding to additional stress. This is something we've heavily invested in because we know it's having an impact on our students as it's reported directly from them. Also, what you need to know now, and this is another important thing, is when we talk about affordability and financing. October 5th is an important date for you as parents and family members to know. And what that is if a student still has a 50% balance on their bill for the fall semester, there is the potential that they will be dropped from their courses, okay? Now, each situation is unique, but what we tell our students and why this is so important is we see our students wait to the very last day to try to figure out how are they going to afford this semester, or maybe something's come up. A family member's perhaps been laid off, or circumstances inside the house have changed that the funding has gone somewhere else. We can help students out. We have scholarships and grants and other things that are available for emergency funds such as this. Now, it may not be the be all end all, but we do have funding that is able to help out where possible. So we encourage our students to really reach out now, make an appointment with someone in University Connect and Persist, or just show up to our one-stop in our administrative center, or meet with someone, a financial coordinator in our Office of Student Financial Assistance. Sit down with someone and say, okay, something's come up, or I've got these classes, I've had to change some things around, so maybe some finances have changed. Can you help me plan this out? Again, if we've talked about the academic plan, the career plan, next to that needs to be the financial plan, because that's so critically important, because we know we want the mind of the student to be in the classroom focusing on their academics, not on about affordability or worrying about the finances. We have things in place that might be able to help out with that. And so seeking that assistance and really encouraging your students to seek that out now rather than later in the semester is so critically important. I also would encourage you, many of your students are on scholarships. As you know, many of these scholarships have requirements. And so what we don't want a student to be caught off surprise if things maybe start slipping in the fall, or as they're heading into the spring, maybe things take a turn and they're struggling a little bit. Go into, if you just Google, and I could have thrown the table up here, but the print was so small. So I just figured, hey, everybody's got a phone available right now. If you just Google or any search engine, just type in NKU scholarship renewal requirements, it's the first thing that pops up in your search. Click on that. You'll be able to find your scholarship or your student scholarship along the left side, and all the requirements are on the right side. So what does a student need to do to maintain that scholarship? Because there's nothing harder than having a conversation with a 4.0 student who didn't take enough credit hours and might have lost their scholarship. And so we have to kind of think of things, because they drop courses thinking like, oh, I'll just make them up next year, not knowing that their scholarship required 30 credit hours after the first year and they'd only completed 22. It's a difficult conversation, especially if they had a 4.0. So we have to work quickly and frantically to try to help them out during the summer so they don't lose that scholarship. So it's important, again, planning wise, to know that. All right, next thing. This is really also critically important to know. And I always say for parents and family members, always kind of have this written somewhere on your calendar or put it in your Outlook calendar so that when it pops up, you can kind of have a conversation with your student around a grade of a W. Now, a grade of a W is a withdrawal. Now, there are some financial implications for this, because if you do continue through all the way through November, you might not be able to get a certain percentage of that course back. But what's critically important about getting a grade of a W is we know circumstances come up with students that as they're progressing through the semester, maybe they're just not doing really well in that course. Maybe organic chemistry is not clicking, even though they've tried and they've gone to tutoring. Or maybe there's circumstances outside their control. Maybe health issues have popped up. Maybe something else has come up where it's diverted their attention over here and they haven't been able to attend class. We've seen it where a student gets into an accident and they don't have a car to be able to commute, so they miss a couple of classes. That can impact a student's grade. And so what a class withdrawal does is, if a student is sitting there and they're worried about a grade like a D or an F that's going to have a negative impact on their GPA, they can file for a grade of a W. And so a grade of a W will show up on their transcript, but it won't negatively impact their cumulative GPA. And so when they go in to retake that course, yes, it'll show that course as a W for that semester, but it didn't impact their GPA, so that when they come in and take the course again, especially if they needed it for their curriculum, then it'll show up, let's say they got a B on that class, it'll supersede, and that B then goes to their cumulative GPA. So that's critically important. We don't want negative things outside their control to negatively impact their GPA. So that's why we do this grade of a withdrawal. Next is priority registration. This is also another hugely critical date, because first year students learning this process. Once you go through it once, you get it. But that first time can be a little intimidating, or they just assume, oh, I can wait to the last day to do this. What priority registration is and why it's so important is that on November 3rd, that's when all NKU students go into My NKU to start registering for spring classes, okay? And this is important because obviously students want to be able to get the courses they need for course completion. Maybe there are certain classes during certain times that work around their work schedule. And so if they need that course, that certain courses and certain times, they want to go in and register as soon as that day hits for their class to register. But why that's so important is they are required to meet with their academic advisor before they can register for spring classes. So if a student's like, yep, I register, let's say my first day is on November 7th, I'm going to go in and register, but they haven't met with their advisor, there's a hold on their account and they won't be able to register. So that's why we tell our students, they're going to start getting emails very shortly, if they haven't gotten them already, to schedule an appointment with their advisor. You have 16,000 students trying to get an appointment with an advisor between now and November. Now we have the dates and times that they can fill up to meet everybody, and we do it in person, virtually, and Zoom. But obviously the students that plan ahead and get an appointment with their advisor before the registration date are ready to register, compared to the student who waited till the start of, let's say, December. They go in and meet with their advisor in December, they go in to start registering, and they're like, all those classes that I wanted are now filled, or those times that I wanted are now filled. And that can send a student into a spiral trying to figure out what I need to do or what classes I need to take. So, but the other important thing is, especially early on, again, as we talk about week 4, this provides another check-in opportunity for your student with their advisor. Your advisor is not only going to help them academically say, these are the courses you need, they're going to sit back and say, hey, how are things going? Have you gotten involved? How are you doing? Is your scholarship, everything aligned there? You understand the scholarship requirements? They're going to have a detailed and comprehensive conversation with your student. And we want that conversation to happen now rather than December, because the advisor is going to be able to see, wait a sec, if you've gotten a couple D's on your midterms and you're sitting in kind of the C and D area, we need to get you connected with tutoring, and they can start having the important conversations around that. So it's another level of support for them. So encourage your student, ask them, hey, have you gotten your appointment with your academic advisor? Just want to make sure you're good to go. Just that simple little question will help spur that reminder for them if they haven't done it.
Ryan, do you mind if I add something to that as well?
Please jump in, Melissa. I'll be able to take a quick sip of water here.
Yeah, go ahead. So especially for parents of incoming new freshmen or transfers, that this is the first semester. I encourage your students to make sure they view My NKU, because they may also have a credential hold from admissions or an orientation hold. And we are communicating this week and next week of any students that we're still missing a final high school transcript for, or a college transcript, or we need you to go into Scoop and finish the online orientation module. So your students will receive emails, a text message, a phone call beginning this week through the next 2 weeks. It won't be the first time they've heard from us, but we're going to try to get ahead of that when they're able to meet with an advisor and there is no admissions hold or orientation hold. So make sure they check My NKU, because they'll see those. And again, the key is keeping an eye on the NKU email, because we are communicating a great deal using that email from the advisor and also from admissions. I just wanted to mention that, Ryan.
Perfect. No, that's great. Thank you so much, Melissa. So I want to take this time and kind of share with you some data, what you need to know now, some important dates. So I just want to take maybe a second to kind of debrief, but more importantly, just have an open and honest conversation around some of the things that we're hearing from our students. So I have the great opportunity to work with our Summer Academy students, our Summer Spark students, and a number of the programs and initiatives that I get to help lead and oversee. I'm talking with students on a daily basis. It's just a wonderful job, is just to get to help interact with these students and help support them as they're heading towards their career goals and everything. And to be very honest with you, what we're hearing from our students right now is a lot of stress in trying to manage through what they went through the last 18 months to the transition to sometimes feeling a little overwhelmed right now. In the afternoon session I had with your students today, again, they saw very similar things. This is a very complimentary presentation that they saw. We opened it up for questions for students, and then we stayed afterwards, a student leader and myself, and students got to come up and ask personal questions, maybe that they didn't feel comfortable asking in front of a group. And I was talking with one of our students, and comes up and just says, look, I got a D on my psychology quiz. I did great through high school. I had zero problems. I was an AB student, and this hit me like a ton of bricks. And student kind of started to get a little teary-eyed and just said, I'm just overwhelmed because I thought I knew how I was going to be able to manage, and I'm just struggling with time management. And to be honest, she said, I was very hesitant and scared to go to a tutor. And so worked with that student through just some conversations, right? In terms of, let's start talking about the test. You're going to be able to overcome that if you address it now. Now, if you wait till midterm or the next couple of quizzes, you're going to just kind of bury yourself, because obviously in a class, that course material builds off itself. So for example, you can't really divide until you know addition, subtraction, and multiplication. We build on that in school. It's the same thing with any of these other courses. You've got to learn pre-history before we can get to more advanced history. And so really encourage the student. We literally walked down to tutoring and really worked with them to say, hey, let's think through some things here. And we got them connected with the director in tutoring to get them connected with, hey, maybe you don't want to do one-on-one tutoring. What about group tutoring? Maybe you sit around with other peers and kind of hear. Talked with another student who also stayed after, who told me during their, I forget what exam it was, I think it was a statistics class, if I'm not mistaken, as they were handing out the statistics test, she got such test anxiety that she thought she was going to vomit everywhere right then and there. She said she's never had that experience at all, but the weight she felt on her shoulders was so huge. And so we talked around like, okay, but you have test anxiety, and maybe this is hopefully the last time this happens, but getting her connected, we got her connected with someone down in University Connect and Persist to talk through some of the learning styles that may be a little bit different compared to the teaching styles that the instructor was using. And so it's just having these open and honest conversations. Now, again, many of you may have students that are just thriving. I have a freshman in college right now. I never hear from him. He's so independent. He absolutely just loves college. He scored a great roommate. He's really getting connected. So my check-ins with him are, hey, don't forget your advising appointment. I need to make sure of that. Hey, did you take care of this? You still got enough meal points. How are you eating? Are you eating healthy every day? Please tell me you're not just eating chicken fingers for 3 days or 3 meals a day. Completely separate. But I'm also just kind of checking in to see how things are going, because I also know my son, I guarantee he's been there for 4 weeks. He's probably done laundry once. So just reminders in that aspect. Others maybe just kind of coasting along, right? Taking a couple of classes virtually. They're doing great in virtual classes, but maybe hate the in-person classes. They really thrive in a virtual setting. And then you've got other students who just, this class over here, amazing. I'm an AB student over in this class. I've never done anthropology before. What is this? I'm struggling. And so the big thing that we want to make sure of is in terms of what you can do now. Now that you kind of know, again, every student is different. That we've got close to 2,000 new students that came onto our campus this semester. Every single one of them is different. There's not a one size fits all. And that's why we work with your student individually every single day. And you, more than anybody, know them best. And so now that you kind of know where some students are, again, some are thriving, but from what we're hearing, a lot of students are kind of stressed out, trying to manage through some of these things. What can you do? And the biggest thing is check in. Don't assume everything's going great. Don't assume that, they're 18, they're on their own, they don't need me anymore. This is so critically important. You saw from that first slide, through that first year, what is critically important? Who do they go to for help? They go to family and they go to parents. Another question I could have showed you is on when seniors graduate, they're about to walk across the stage, shake the hands of the president, get their diploma, they get what's called the senior survey. And one of the questions on there is who basically helped propel you to this point. And it wasn't necessarily faculty, it wasn't necessarily peers. They continue to say it was their parents and their family members. So I always say check in now. And the question I usually get back from parents is, okay, what am I checking in on? What are some recommendations? Here are just some easy talking points to just jump into. Simply ask how our class is going. You will be surprised at how far that question is. You may think your student is tough as a rock. My student, again, super independent. My son's always been super independent. As soon as I asked how classes were going, 30 minutes later, he stopped talking because he wanted to tell me about, oh my gosh, so he's an art major. So he was telling me about, you will not believe what I'm doing in our classes. And he just kept going. And it was just a simple question. How are things going? Are you getting involved on campus? Asking them, are they making that connection? That is so critically important. It shows that you are also vested and interested in what they're doing. You may, again, think 18, they're an adult, they're good. They still want to be able to share what they're doing and kind of some of the cool things that they're experiencing. Ask them, are they meeting people? Do you need help with anything? That question, again, can go a long way. And maybe sometimes you may feel uncomfortable asking those questions. You feel like you're prying. We use this as an introduction all the time. I'll just go to a student, I'll say, hey, how are things going? I get good. And then I'll just turn around and say, fine, tell me something fun that's going on. Tell me something cool that happened this week. And then all of a sudden, that's my doorway in. Oh yeah, I got to attend this seminar with this professor, and he was talking about all these things. I was like, okay. He was talking about astrology. Have you thought about the astrology club? Have you gotten connected? Did you know that there's other things on campus around this? Have you gone over to the astrology tower? All these things, that's the gateway in. Just tell me something fun. And then check back heading into midterms. This isn't I'm gonna check in once, I hear they're doing good, or I got them the help they needed, I'm done. That constant check-in will go a long way. And this is something that's critically important as well. And you'll be surprised and moved at how important this is the encouragement and small nudges. You'll be surprised how far a text message can go. If you know a student, if you know your student has a test coming up, let's say it's on Friday, they wake up Friday morning and open, because let's get real, first thing they do when they wake up in the morning is this thing's right in front of their face. If they see a message from mom or a message from dad or a message from grandpa that says, good luck on your test today, we're thinking of you, who's not gonna have a great day starting with that? A care package or a car surprise. So this is where I get somewhat emotional. I've cried before when it first happened, but you know, it is what it is. But I think it's important to share. So my mother recently passed, and that's why telling this story, but this was my mother. So I went away to college, and growing up, my mother there was always some baked good in the house. She always loved to bake cookies or brownies. We always had baked goods. Going away to college, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not gonna have these baked goods. Once a month, I got this little care package in the mail. It was Grater's cookies and Grater's licorice, my favorite thing on earth. And so it was just those small little things. She taped, and this is showing my age, a $5 bill to the top of that and said, go eat out somewhere. I'm sure you're sick of eating inside the residence halls. So I went and ordered a pizza. It was just those small little things. If your student's a commuter, not living on campus, you're not going to do a care package. I've heard about parents and family members who on a test day, they sneak out, and as their students got in the car, they had already the night before sent a package of cookies or something, some surprise, or maybe just a $5 bill saying, before class today, go grab yourself a Starbucks. That you have no idea the impact that has on a student, especially when they're stressed out and trying to figure everything out. Just to know that in the back of their mind, mom, dad, family members, they still care and are still vested and interested in what I'm doing. So those small little things can go a long way. And then I just really kind of end with talk with your student about anything. I started out talking about the weather. I'm sitting here sweating right now because the humidity is supposedly coming through the bricks of my house. It's so hot outside. Just how's the weather today? I mean, just all you have to do is just that initial conversation to get it going. Having talked with parents and family members over the last few years about this, it's just that entry point that is so critical, and you'll just be surprised at how open your student will be about how things are going in the classroom, because now you're armed with the information they need to know. And so I'll end with this. Mindset, motivation, and support. The reason we have these conversations now is because we don't want your student to go down a spiral, and a spiral they feel like they can't get out of, all right? So your students are turning to their peers for help, encourage that. Have your students advocate for other students. Hey, you were telling me about your friend struggling in this class. Did you reach out to make sure that they got connected to tutoring? Those types of things are super important. You're helping other students out, but then you're also indirectly telling that your student, hey, if you need help, make sure you're getting help. Encourage them to talk to their faculty members, go to office hours, stay after class. Your faculty are doing what they're doing because they get to teach and specialize in their area of interest for their entire life. They love talking about what they do and what they teach. That's why they give their life to that subject. So that motivation, that mindset is something we really try to instill with our students, that every person's gonna hit a bump or an obstacle along their first year. The students that succeed know how to get over that bump and and once they get over that bump, they know the resources and support they have in place or what they need to do or search out to get over that bump. That's how they learn, and that's how they then persist and continue on with that motivation. Again, encourage them to stay on campus before, in between, and after classes. If your student is a commuter and has class that ends at 1 and their next one's at 3, tell them to stay on campus between 1 and 3. Don't have them drive home and stay there for 45 minutes before they have to get back in the car and come back. Get involved with the student organization. Sit in Starbucks and study. You're going to see somebody in class that's going to start a conversation. Have lunch on campus and sit down with some people you haven't, you see in class, and just say, hey, mind if I sit down? Those are the interactions that our students are dying for. And so that socialization is so critical and so important. And again, I can't emphasize it more, and this is why we talked to you during week 4. Encourage your student not to wait. Seek help and support now. It is so critically important, because every student at some point is going to have that little obstacle, as I said, or that mound to get over. They know how to get through it now rather than later. They will be more successful. All right. So hopefully I've armed you with a whole bunch of important information, how to engage with your students, the things you might want to ask. Your students heard similar, if they attended the session today, heard similar things. A lot of the students were really interested in tutoring and kind of, oh, you mean high achieving students are the ones going to tutoring? Yes, we want you to become a high achieving student. Go to tutoring. So again, these are conversations. This isn't going to be this is the first, but it won't be the last. We'll be having 2 more that we do throughout the semester, kind of touch points. The next one we tend to do is around advising, especially as your students heading towards priority registration. We want to share with you what those conversations are taking place between the advisor and your student, so that you can help your student prepare for that advising appointment and make the most out of it. And we also have some key dates that we'll share with you, that not only do we share through the listserv, if you haven't signed up, make sure you do, so you get those dates, but we'll make sure that we can answer questions and clarity around them, because as your students going through the fall semester, we want them to be as prepared as possible for the spring semester. So with that, I'm going to ask Melissa to unmute. Feel free. We have about maybe 5-10 minutes. We can stay a little bit after as well if there's more questions coming in. So if you have questions of clarity or additional information you'd like to know, Melissa and I would be happy to answer them. So Melissa, I know you've been kind of manning the Q&A and chat. Were there anything that you'd like to bring forward for us to talk about?
Sure. So we're going to post a recording of the student session on the Parents Association page. And that, I was trying to get the link for us.
I'll go ahead and stop sharing here so we can go and you can see. Unfortunately, our face is a little bit more blown up, but there we go.
That's okay. So we're going to post it on the Parents Association page. And that link is, Ryan, how can I post this in chat and everyone?
If you put it in chat, everybody can see it. Yep.
Okay, I will post it here.
And the other nice thing about the recording is when you do the recording, you'll actually see, if I'm not mistaken, chat as well. The thing I always like to tell our parents and family and students as well is let Google be your friend. As long as you put NKU in front of whatever you're looking for, it usually pops up as the first or second on top of the search. So even if you put NKU tutoring, boom, it'll bring up Learning Plus. If you have questions about financial aid, NKU financial aid, boom, it pulls it right up. You don't know where University Connect and Persisters or UCAP, all you gotta do is type in NKU UCAP, first thing that comes up. So let Google be your friend for sure.
And if you're not receiving the newsletters that we share with parents and family members, I'm going to post the link here. You do have to subscribe to this. And then,
okay, perfect. You just answered that question. Excellent.
Yep.
Yes, if my student did not attend today, will they? Yes, absolutely. So all first year students were invited to the session today. And we know students were either in, some, not all, but most students could have been in class or maybe had virtual classes, so they weren't on campus. So what they're going to do is they're going to take the recording from the session and they're going to put it next to the PowerPoint presentation. It's going to take a couple days to do, but then we're going to blast that out to all first year students' NKU email address, so they have it. Absolutely. Great question.
There was a question about reimbursement on campus, and I wanted to mention that we do have a relationship with Education at Work, and I did put information about that opportunity where we partner with companies and organizations that hire NKU employees, NKU students as employees through Education at Work. And some of those companies do have tuition reimbursement. If they have a typical work study job on campus that does not provide tuition reimbursement. However, Ryan mentioned about managing time. I will tell you, when we're able to get a student to get a job on campus, it does help them work between classes and so forth. And we become another support network for that student to help retain them and be a good resource for them. So we encourage you, if you visit jobs.nku.edu, and I will put this in the chat, your son or daughter can look at different jobs that are available on campus that are student employment options as well.
Yep, the student tab is the first one on the left. It says students when you get in there. And the other benefit to that, I mean, obviously we talked about if you work at McDonald's or Chipotle or other places, Kroger, that have tuition reimbursement plans, obviously that's a huge thing. But for students that are also maybe just looking for 5 to 10 hours in between classes, working on campus, the other benefit of that is, as Melissa alluded to, not only are the supervisors checking in on your students to say, how are things going? But the other side of that, we cannot schedule them to work during classes or during any of their finals or midterms. So we work around their academic schedule. So if we see a student that's not in class, who's one of our workers, we know they're not working because they're supposed to be in class. So that's another benefit too, is we work around their academic schedules. You want to talk, Melissa? We have a question. Where do I find payment info to send in tuition? You want to talk about student account services?
Yes, student account services. If you, again, as Ryan mentioned, if you go to the NKU website, nku.edu, and you type in the search bar student account services, it will bring up all of the deadlines that Ryan mentioned as well, and also has information about the payment plan, the installment tuition plan. If students had not paid their full balance by the first day of classes, they're automatically enrolled into the tuition installment plan. But again, we're trying to help students navigate the financial cost of education. So the goal was that you at least had 50% down at the first day of class, and you've made a 25% payment by mid-September and 25% by mid-October. We do have new students and current students that are not new that do have tuition balances, of course, for this fall. And the main goal is to sit down and have a conversation with their student. You can pull the My NKU and go to the student biller tab and see the bill as it was provided and available the end of July. And you can have any questions about that, you can reach out to student account services. But again, families are already in the tuition installment plan if the full balance was not paid the first day of school. Ryan, there's someone asking if we can drop some links into the Q&A because they cannot access the chat.
Oh, that's fun. That's my,
So,
my
and I'm
apologies.
trying-
I was told everything was going to go in chat. That's where everybody see it. We can definitely do that.
So I'm trying to understand how to do that. If you could help get some
I
links
will
there, that would be
happily
great.
do that. So I'm going to see if I can take everything in chat here. I had questions and the links, and I'm just going to dump them straight into. There we go. Let's see if it'll allow me.
How do
to
we
do
get
it.
our freshmen to make friends? Not very outgoing. So that's a real brave question as a family member to ask. And I think the main opportunity is that students need to figure out 2 or 3 interests they have. If your son or daughter has chosen an academic major, there are typical academic clubs that are associated with most majors. We encourage students that may be a little shy to think about getting a job on campus because it allows them to get to know other students. We also encourage taking a look at our student organization pages to see if there's something that might be interest to them. And I think sometimes it's trying to reach across a classroom and get a study group started because you're around those students a lot. Some of that can take place with a study group. Ryan mentioned about being brave and asking questions in the student union and so forth, but sometimes walking out of class and asking if someone wants to grab a cup of coffee at Starbucks or grab lunch, it's a difficult conversation to have, but it does help students. I would also say maybe they have friends from their own high school that did attend and they're at NKU. So there's nothing wrong with reaching back to someone they knew from high school and saying, we're both at NKU. Let's grab a cup of coffee or have lunch. That's helpful as well.
Yes, and the one thing I will add, and I know, and I apologize, we're trying to get it over to the Q&A. It's not posting, it's not copying and pasting. So what we'll do is when we send this out to everybody, we'll make sure that we send all of those links to you as well, that we'll make sure they're in the email itself. So our apologies for that. We were told when we set this up, the chat was going to be viewable to everybody. So unfortunately, I don't think that's the case. That's okay though. So the other thing then too is with what Melissa said, you know, when we talk with students a little bit, again, even if they can just get into their advising center or somewhere where there's peer leaders, every advising center typically has a peer leader. And so they can have one-on-one conversations with a peer. So again, if you have a son or daughter that's a little introverted, maybe they're the only student that came from their high school here, so they may not know a lot of people, and just are kind of staying really focused in class and not really kind of reaching across the aisle to talk. Even if they just go to an academic advising center or reach out to their orientation leader, they're very much willing to sit down and just kind of talk and get them connected. We had a student in our summer Spark, this would have been 2 or 3 years ago, might have been 4 years ago, how fast time is going, was in that similar boat, very introverted, even during summer Spark was kind of having a difficult time connecting with others. And so sat down myself and an orientation leader, and we were sitting there just, not an orientation leader, peer coach, doesn't matter. And we were sitting there talking with him and said, you know, well, what are your interests? And he was a huge Dungeons and Dragons fan. And so we sent an email to the president of the Dungeons and Dragons Club, and I literally saw him at, not Fresh Start, but Victor Fest, walking around. And he said he is not only highly connected with the Dungeons and Dragons Club, he's also in with the Rocket League gaming group. So that little connection, just, hey, I need help with something. We got him connected, talking to another student, that can initiate a spark right there. All right, I know we are at past time. We are happy to stay after if anybody wants to continue asking questions, and we'll stay online, and we don't see any questions come in over the next couple of minutes. We'll go ahead and jump off as well. But we want to take this time, again, this is, as I shared with the students who came to the session today, you showing up tonight shows your dedication towards your student. And so we just want to make sure we continue in this partnership. If at any time you run into obstacles, you're getting a runaround on something, you're not getting an answer to something, please reach out. We tell our students, and we just talked about this for an hour, make sure they're reaching out for help. Please do the same to us. We're here for you as well to support you. So we will continue to have these ongoing sessions. We hope to see you over the next couple Stronger Together workshops. We'll be blasting those out through the listserv and through your emails as well. So please check those often. And again, we just cannot thank you enough for your dedication, not only to coming today, but towards your students and their continued success. So with that, we will say good evening, and we'll stick around again for the remainder of the time if anybody else has any other questions. And again, we apologize that the links didn't come through chat, but we will make sure we get those attached to the email when we send out this recording. So with that, again, with Norse Pride, thank you so much, and we will hopefully see you here in the coming days and weeks. Take care. Oh yes, the book voucher, the 250 book voucher. It is one time, if I'm not mistaken, for fall only. Is that correct, Melissa?
Yes, it is.
Yes. So if they don't use it all for fall, they will lose it. Now, again, the other thing is people hear book voucher. It can be used for any educational supplies. So we know we had students that used it as towards an iPad. Others used it for notebooks or paper. So even if they've used 150 of it and they still have 100 of it left, encourage them to say, hey, do you need supplies for next semester? Do you need, junk drives? Do you need, wires for connectors, whatever it may be? It can be used for any educational purposes within the bookstore. Even if they buy books for spring semester in the fall, I believe the books have to be applied towards this fall. Do not quote me on that. Maybe we need to, Melissa.
I'm trying to find something online.
Okay.
Real quick,
and what we can do, Melissa, too, is if we can make a note of that. And so when we send the email out with all the responses and other things, we can add that as a response. And then when we get a formal response from Barnes & Noble. This was something very new for us. And unfortunately, it's an area neither one of us oversee. So we know enough to be dangerous, but unfortunately, we don't know the kind of the intrinsic details of it. Great questions. I love it. I tell your students all the time, I love when there's questions. This is what learning is about. So please, any others?
I would have this, the student go into the bookstore this week and,
Yeah.
and
Good
speak to someone, and they can make sure they get the correct answer for your student.
I know the silence can sometimes be deafening. We tell our students all the time, in terms of good pedagogy from a faculty perspective, when you ask a question, it's the human mind can take up to 30 seconds to kind of pull a comprehensive answer to that question. So sometimes when we ask questions in class, we say, hey, we're going to wait 30 seconds because we know it takes a little bit of time to pull your answer together. So I know that 30 seconds of silence can feel like an eternity, but again, we want to make sure we have the opportunity to answer any questions you may have. Maybe stay around to about another minute or so. If we don't see much movement, we'll go ahead and we'll go ahead and log off as well. So we'll go ahead and have a last call. And I want to thank you publicly again, Melissa, for doing this. Greatly appreciate your time and dedication to our students.
Wonderful to spend some time with parents. I'm a parent of a 2020 NKU grad, so pretty proud of my daughter, and everything that Ryan mentioned, I could see my daughter navigating and finding success along her journey. So NKU is very supportive of our students, and I will also put my email in the chat as well. If you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out, and I can serve as a resource to get you to the right place. And Ryan, I'll put yours here too, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
What is it? PADGETT?
R1.
R1. All right.
All righty. Well, everyone, thank you so much. Again, if you have any questions, don't ever hesitate to email us. This was a pleasure to get to talk with you today. I know it seemed one-sided because we didn't get to have much of a dialogue or discussion in the webinar setting, but at the same time, we greatly appreciate your time and dedication, not only to tonight, but again, to your students. So with that, we will say good night, and everyone enjoy your evening. And again, we look forward to hopefully seeing you in the coming weeks. Thanks again, Melissa. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.